To my explainer tonight. Now, these last few days, the world has been focused on the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, Scotland, a conference that has been held for the last 26 years. That is COP26. But just what is the big deal around climate change? Well, one word, well, two actually, that dominate the conversation in this space is 1.5 degrees. Now, there have been calls to ensure that global temperatures do not rise by 1.5 degrees Celsius. Well, that idea has dominated climate change talks for years. But during a similar meeting in Paris, dubbed COP21 in 2015, 196 countries finally made a binding international treaty known as the Paris Agreement. Now, part of the agreement was to limit the rise of global temperatures to well below 2 degrees, preferably 1.5 degrees compared to pre-industrial levels. Now, this would mean changing how countries develop, for example, reducing the amount of petroleum products they use, employing clean energy sources such as geothermal, wind and solar, and so on. And yes, it is a big deal if global temperatures rise by just 1.5 degrees above what they used to be before the Industrial Revolution. Now, let me start with an analogy that will help us understand. Let's take a look at the human body. Now, our average body temperature is between 36.2 degrees and 37.2 degrees. Now, if your body temperature rises by about 1 degree or maybe 1.3 degrees, that is from 37.2 to 38.5, then the doctor will tell you that you have an average fever. If your temperature then hits 39 degrees or even 40 degrees, then the doctors will be even more concerned and you will be given medication to bring down your temperature. Now, a fever, as you know, is always a sign that something else is going on in your body, like an infection that would need to be treated. The symptoms of a fever, we know this: chills, shivering, shaking, body aches. And if you're a parent, then you know fevers in your children are usually worrisome and something that you want to bring under control as quickly as possible. So as we've said, fevers are a signal of something else that is happening in the body. So just like a 1 to 2 degree increase in body temperature will destabilize most body systems, a rise in global temperatures too interferes with the balance that makes life on planet Earth comfortable. So, according to scientists at the World Meteorological Organization, Kenya has seen a rise in temperatures of at least 1.9 degrees Celsius, and the effects of these are there for all to see. In the health sector, for instance, you may have or you will start to see a rise in rates of diseases like malaria, Rift Valley fever, dengue fever, and chikungunya. What's more is you will start to see these outside the areas you would typically see them. You see, mosquitoes which carry the malaria-causing parasite survive better in warm places. And so as the temperatures rise, they will now be able to live in areas that were previously too cold for them. And so you will see more people getting malaria there, like in the central Kenya highlands. Now, do you remember the locust invasion we had recently? That too is largely due to a warmer planet, and it has to do with oceans. So let me explain. You see, oceans absorb about 90% of the heat that is caused by human activity. And this warming up of the Indian Ocean is linked to an increased number and intensity of cyclones in East and Southern Africa. In 2018, there were 2 cyclones, and usually they're given names. So those 2 cyclones were called Mekanu and Luban. They created desert lakes and vegetation, and these provided great breeding grounds for the locusts. And then those cyclone winds we've talked about helped move the locusts towards East Africa. And if you remember, that was one of the worst locust invasions Kenya had seen in decades. The effects were clear. Thousands of acres of food crops destroyed and farmers experiencing huge losses. As if that's not enough, let's take you back to 2019. Remember, we experienced a sharp rise in the price of tomatoes? Here is why. Remember then, we experienced record amounts of rainfall. Now, I know what you're thinking, rain is good, yes, but too much of it is not. This does not do well for tomatoes, which become more perishable during the wet seasons. Average prices of tomatoes actually went up from about 88 shillings a kilo to over 300 shillings a kilo in the course of 2 years. That's from 2017 to 2019. Now, The warmer planet has also led to wetter than normal seasons, which have led to a rise in levels of lakes. We all remember Lake Baringo levels rising last year, iconic photos like these, displacing people, homes and schools. In fact, those schools are just now being rebuilt over a year later. And let's not even talk about the erratic weather patterns we have seen over the last few years. This year alone, we saw an extended cold season. Remember that? It started in May and went all the way up until September, rather than the usual June, July months. Failed rains, for example, the long rain season we should be receiving right now, which should have started in mid-October. Many farmers are still waiting for those rains now. And you know, we've had the perennial cycle of drought, followed by flooding, and we've seen it make it very difficult for farmers to plant. And this is why scientists are keen on ensuring that the planet does not get warmer than it already is. So, what's happening in Glasgow, Scotland? A number of things. First, an agreement was made on a raft of issues, but more importantly, on deforestation. The leaders made a commitment to stop and reverse deforestation and land degradation by the year 2030. And this is important because trees absorb the vast amounts, I would say, of carbon dioxide, which contributes to the warming of the planet. Now, whether this will be successful or not, we will have to wait and see, because a previous deal on the same in 2014, quote, failed to slow deforestation at all. Now, that's our explainer tonight.